So my name is Rabbi Mordechai Lightstone. I run Tech Tribe together with my wife Hannah. And so this talk has been called AI and Identity through the lens of the Talmud. The first question is when we speak about intellectual property. There was actually a talk I think I gave last summer where we discussed the idea of, can AI take your ideas and remix them and reuse them in some other form? Is that allowed? And for that particular talk, I'm just going to do a very, very brief review. The discussion is actually around that book that we saw on the previous slide, which focuses on a printing of the works of Maimonides. That there was a work of Maimonides Maimonides being the great Jewish philosopher and halachist, master of Jewish law from the Middle Ages, and it was reprinted in the Renaissance. And the following case happened. This is from the halachic responsum of the Ramah, Rabbi Moshe Israelis. Let us examine the case which occurred. The famous Rabbi Meir Katznelmogen, known as the Maram of Padua, devoted substantial time, effort, and resources to partner with the aristocratic non-Jewish publisher Albise Bragadini to print a defective edition of the Rambam's Mishnah Torah. A rich aristocrat, Mark Antonio Giustiniani, decided to publish the same book, incorporating the Maram's notes, out of spite for the rabbi's decision to partner with a competitor, and in order to anger the rabbi and cause him financial ruin, knowing that if he undercut his price and sold his version, the Maram would be unable to recoup his investment. I will judge this case according to the laws of Israel, if both were Jews, and I will prove that the four arguments the winning side is with the Maharam. Essentially, the Maharam, this rabbi, produced a beautiful edition of the Mishnah Torah. If you look over here, you can actually see this is the competitor's version. Both of them had really amazing, sharp, clear lettering. The Maharam went ahead and added glosses and kind of condensed all different commentaries about them together and really created a state-of-the-art work. He first spoke to a printer in Venice, that is the Giustiniani. At the time, Jews were not allowed to print themselves. They had to partner with a non-Jewish patron who would actually do the printing. This was a way the church could impose a level of censorship on the Jews. And then he ended up speaking to this other guy, Bragadini, and partnering with him to create the finished work. Giustiniani was not happy about this. He felt that it was a slap in his face that this work had been published with his competitor, and therefore he created his own version and undercut the price, copying all the text from the Maharam's version. So essentially, we have a classic case here of copyright infringement, where a rabbi, or before copyright, but a rabbi has a work and it gets copied and put in another place. And in the next slide, which I'm just going to summarize outside so we can have more time for question and answer, the main focus of this ultimately is decided that a ban was put on copying the work until the rabbi could get back his initial investment, recoup his initial investment. And this is actually one of the earliest cases of copyright in Western civilization, before the kind of British common law, which was more than a century later. And create this idea within Jewish thought that an idea itself, when put to paper and published, you have a level of ownership of it. The exact details of that, you can look at the last class, I believe it's online, somewhere in Google Drive, whatever it is. But that the ideas themselves, you may or may not own according to Jewish law, but for sure the work and investment put in to publish it is yours, and you have the rights to make sure that you at least get back how much you put in there. But the question is your body your own? If you have your likeness, your picture, you're a celebrity, which all of you guys here are definitely celebrities and iconic people, and an AI is trained on your picture, and someone says, hey, let me make a picture of a rabbi, and it looks like me, and what's going on over here, and apparently it went and it scraped all my photos that I've uploaded online, and it goes ahead and I see myself endorsing bacon. I never gave the right to do that, but it was trained on my likeness. Is that allowed? Or if it took the voice of a famous person, do you have the right to that output as well? It's not an idea. Ideas, there is already, discussion in Jewish law. But what about my own body? So from the point of view of Jewish law, your body, your likeness is not something that you own. The Code of Jewish Law, when it speaks about the laws of damaging the body, it is forbidden to strike another person, even when that person grants him permission to do so, because the person has no authority whatsoever over his own body. Not to have it struck, not to have it subject to pain, or afflicted with any pain, even if only by withholding any sort of food or drink from it. You can't willingly hurt yourself. There are exceptions to this. There are exceptions if it's for a positive purpose. So, for example, obviously, number one, a medical procedure, right, may cause pain, may cause discomfort. Be allowed to subject your body to that because you're trying to heal yourself. If a person wants to fast for penitential reasons, that as well has an ultimate positive effect on the person, because as much as a person experiences discomfort from fasting, they're going to have the good feeling that I've repented, that I've turned over a new leaf, I've made myself better, and therefore that type of pain could be allowed as well. Maybe working out, anything like that, where maybe you're going to have a temporary sense of pain. But just to walk up to somebody and say, hey, you have permission to slap me on the face, and I'm not going to press charges, whatever it is, you don't have the right, or you don't have the ability to do that in Jewish law, because your body is not your own. And therefore, if your body is not your own, it would seem to be that your likeness as well is not something that belongs to you, and therefore to try and claim ownership over it is much more wrong. The question is, why is it that your body isn't your own? Seemingly, private property definitely exists in Jewish law. There are many tractates of the Talmud that speak about private property, all kinds of damage, tort laws, questions about ownership of things. So why would it be that, this seltzer could be mine? I could sell it, I could give it away for free, I could smash it, or whatever it is. There may be issues around wantonly wasting food products or things like that, but ultimately, it's something that belongs to me. But my body, which seems to be the most mine, is somehow not considered mine at all. So it's a scriptural decree that the court does not. This is from Maimonides. It's a scriptural decree. The court does not execute a person or have him lashed because of his own admission. Instead, the punishments are given on the basis of testimony of two witnesses. The general principle is disqualification of a person's own testimony is a decree of the king. That, according to the Maimonides, states very clearly, a person can't go ahead and go up to the police and say, hey, I did this and this thing, and kill me now, or whatever it is, or go to a judge and be summarily executed for that. One of the reasons the Maimonides gives is death by cop, that the idea that someone might not be well and trying to use the punishment as a way to get around prohibition on self-harm or something like that. But whatever it is, that a person cannot incriminate themselves. There's no self-incrimination in Jewish law. You need to have witnesses come in. And he says that ultimately this is a decree of the king, it's a decree of God. God says that we punish based on the testimony of others, not a person's own confession to do themselves harm. So why is this? The Rambam says there's no reason, but the commentaries kind of jump in right away and say, well, we have a little bit of a reason as to why a person's own personhood is something that is not theirs and is considered, to be beyond their ability to harm. So it's possible to give a partial reason for this. This is the Radbaz. It's a Renaissance rabbi who was born in Spain and then ultimately lived in Israel and in Egypt and moved back and forth. It's possible to give a partial reason for this, since a person's life is not their own possession, but rather that of the Holy One, blessed be He. Therefore, his confession of his own guilt won't help for something that does not belong to him. Ultimately, however, this is a decree from the Creator of the world, which cannot be questioned. So even though he has to come back to Maimonides things that ultimately we don't have a full explanation as to why a person's body is not considered their own, part of it is because the idea that our body is not alone to us. God has given us our body, we'll discuss a little more later on, and it's there for a purpose. It's there to be used to do something, to accomplish something in the world, but it's not our own to grant harm. And therefore, it would seem to be from all of this that we're left with kind of the most basic answer is that your voice, your likeness, your image does not technically belong to you. And therefore to say, well, this is mine, and therefore you can't copy it, you're not, you don't have ownership over it to make that claim in the first place. And therefore, seemingly an AI trained on my likeness or the likeness of someone else and using that image over and over again, and someone else goes ahead and takes it, I can't go ahead and say, and it's mine, I want it. Now, the simple question is, why is it that Judaism doesn't say, I have the right to my image, right? I have the right to this. And that's because there's a classical difference between Western understanding of a person's obligations and the Jewish understanding. That in Western law and secular law, there's the idea of rights, right? I have inherent rights that I'm given. From the Jewish point of view, it's not about rights, it's about responsibilities. My responsibility to God, my responsibility to my fellow human beings, my responsibility to my fellow Jews, my responsibility to myself, but not about the rights that I have. This is from Rabbi Aaron Lichtenstein, who was the dean of the Yeshiva Har Zion. He says, philosophically, secularism regards the individual as primordial and inherently invested with unlimited rights. It is only at a secondary plane that these are somewhat circumscribed in order, as in social contract theory, to assure modus vivendi with others and thus guarantee the rights of each. Halacha, on the other hand, regards man as intrinsically limited by his metaphysical relationship to God. The normative thrust of halacha is reflected in its approach to reciprocal relationships, in whose formulation mutual responsibilities loom large. And therefore, from the point of view of Jewish law, the question is not, do I have the right to my likeness and that an AI can be trained on it? Rather, the question is somebody else who's making, looking at people possibly in the room or in the room over there who are making the AI, do they have an obligation towards other people? That's where the question would lie. And so for that, there were 3 reasons to forbid training an AI on a person's likeness, on their voice, that I could find. And we'll have time for a conversation afterwards. Maybe we can figure out some more. So the first one is an issue of deceiving others. In Jewish thought, this is called genevat hadat, deceiving other people. And so for this, Maimonides writes, it is forbidden to deceive people. One should not press his colleague to share a meal with him when he knows that his colleague will not accept the invitation, nor should he press presents upon him when he knows that his colleague will not accept them. He shall not open casks supposedly for his colleague, which he must open for sale in order to deceive him into thinking they have been opened in his honor. The same applies to all matters of this sort. So say, for example, I am a wine merchant and I have incredibly expensive, casks of wine. And somebody comes over for a Shabbat meal, at the Chabad house, and I have, my bottles of wine. And really, I'm going to open them up because I'm doing a tasting tomorrow. And I have to open this bottle because someone wants to come in and taste it and see if he wants to buy the whole lot. But I want to impress the person who came over and said, hey, look at this. I'm opening this rare vintage just for you. So that's considered genevat hadas. I'm going to open it anyway, right? The person is going to enjoy drinking it. Seemingly, there's no harm done, but Judaism says this is an issue because the person thinks this is done specifically for them, and the reality it was not. It was done for some other reason. And therefore, the first issue with AI can be very simply this idea that you're deceiving somebody. Either somebody's going to look and say, hey, Rabbi Lightstone is going ahead and, endorsing this product, and I haven't endorsed it, right? Or the fact that they're taking my image without me giving that, type of consent and acknowledgement. There's this issue of genevat hadas. That's the first potential issue. The second one is embarrassment, right? What happens if somebody takes my likeness or the likeness of someone else, puts them online, and people do all kinds of different things that are embarrassing. They compromise the person feels a sense of shame. So this, again, is an issue as well. So the Code of Jewish Law says, even though one who embarrasses someone with words is not obligated to make restitutions, it is a grievous sin. One who degrades and blasphemes the people and shames them is but an evil and rude fool. Anyone who embarrasses an upright person among the Jewish people has no place in the world to come. This is a very harsh statement, essentially meaning that there's no monetary damage for embarrassing someone in words, right? In non-material ways. If you embarrass someone physically, there are fines that are placed on that. But if a person just feels a sense of shame because, my likeness was, put online and used by people who had access to the AI, whatever it was, that could be a second potential issue. It's not one that you could sue in a Jewish court for, but it's one that makes the person creating the product obligated to make sure they don't create this potential sense of embarrassment. And finally, the third one, there are potential damages in the sense that if a celebrity is wanting to do celebrity endorsements, right? And their voice, they're normally paid to use their voice. And now they've been withheld from making profit in that particular case, right? Because normally you would go ahead and pay me for it. Now you've done something that someone can then use something that sounds like it. I'm not making any money. This is not so clear cut. But within Jewish law, there's an idea that potentially preventing someone from turning a profit could also be a form of damage. So here's a case that uses the names Reuben and Shimon. Those are generic names in Jewish law, meaning, person A and person B. That if Reuben produces a contract that Shimon owes him whatever profit he would otherwise receive, would have otherwise made, he doesn't owe him money, since this is just an extra level of assurance. Since preventing someone from turning a profit is not considered a damage. So generally speaking, the question is, what happens if someone comes with a contract? So sometimes people write contracts in which they kind of go above and beyond in the terms of the wording there to try and really make the case that I'm really, really serious about this. For example, I'm going to, meet this certain guarantee, whatever it is, or all the guy, $1 billion, in the sense of two regular people, not, major corporations doing it that they're able to do it. And when the money is so outlandish, the courts say the fact that he went above and beyond and used, a really, non-normative amount means he was just trying to say, I'm really, really serious about this. So if two guys make a contract, someone says, that come with me on this trip, and you're gonna have a great time, it's gonna be amazing. And if you don't, I'll, pay back whatever profits you would have turned during that period of time had you not gone on the trip. So there, it could be that the reason why I'm saying that is trying to say, I'm really serious, you're gonna have a really good time, you really should go on this trip. And I'm not trying, and it doesn't mean that he actually owes him the profits they could have made theoretically during that time doing some other type of work. But the Aruch HaShulchan, the author of this over here, says, it seems to me that preventing someone from turning a profit is considered a form of damage if it is for an irregular job it doesn't rely on to make a living. someone would have had an odd job. Had I not gone on this trip with you, at that moment, there would have been a deal that came through that I wasn't expecting. I'm sure I would have, made a lot of money. That you can't say is a form of damage. If it's his main job, we can indeed consider it a form of damage for which is liable. But if a person, regularly makes money by using their voice, and now because of the AI, just to extrapolate this, it's now they can't. So this could be considered a form of damage. So those are the three reasons I was able to find. We'll open up for conversation in a moment to see if people have others or whatever it is. But the final thing is a note that I think circles back to the original idea, and that's the idea of human sanctity, which I think also is very pertinent and relevant to this conversation. Why is it that if a person doesn't have the ability to consent and say, harm my body, why can't you do that? So the reason, explaining the Radbaz and Maimonides, those earlier commentaries, the Lubavitch Rebbe says that our bodies are not our personal property, but are on loan from God to fulfill our mission in this world. Thus, we're not only permitted, we are not only not permitted to mutilate our bodies in any way, but expressly forbidden to do so. The human form is home to our soul, a sacred vehicle on loan from the Creator through which mitzvahs can be performed. Our material possessions, the creations, so that's in terms of our bodies, that our bodies are fundamentally sacred because they are there for the ultimate purpose for which we all exist in this world. And that is the soul and the body together to make this world a better place. Our material possessions, which we do have control over in the creations of our hands, are indeed trusted to us. We can own them, we can do things to them, we can damage them. So that but it's for a purpose, so we may uplift them and sanctify them by revealing the inherent godliness in this world. Which I think when we speak about questions of AI and its intersection with the soul, understanding the sanctity of the human beings, of a human being, with the limitations we possess, with the foibles we possess, understanding that the reason why we have these bodies which are so inherently flawed and not perfect is to be able to uplift them and make this world a better place, gives us a new look, I think, on the purpose of all that. So it's a good question. I should say with all this, this is obviously a breaking subject, so to speak, so there's less discussed about it. It would seem to me that they're not distinguishing. I think when I was researching this, something interesting I found, which didn't go into the kind of the end thing, was a question about postmodern photography. That for a period very early on, photography was just on the cusp of existing. And people didn't have photos of relatives, and now photography exists, and a relative passes away, and there's a photographer in town. Can you take a picture? And there was actually a scandal in Hungary where there was a very famous rabbi who had never consented for his photo to be taken, and then he passed away, and they took a picture of him, or maybe they didn't. There was a debate if he was alive or not at the time. But were they allowed to take a picture? Because in Jewish law, you're not allowed. There are very strong, prohibitions placed upon us from having any benefit from a dead body. So if you take a picture of the dead body, are you benefiting from it? Are you not? There are separate reasons why it's forbidden, because it's considered in general embarrassment to the body. But there were people who wanted to say that maybe taking the picture, you're not really getting any benefit because no action was done. There's no direct connection, and therefore you could sell the picture because you're not benefiting from this dead body. The photo is yours, and its connection to the body is kind of somewhat abstracted that way. I think it really is fascinating, that kind of question about how we view AI, and from a simple point of view, I think that it wouldn't be. I mean, that's my gut feeling, that an AI would not be considered human. There may be reasons why. Like, I tell my kids, we have a Google Home at home, and I tell my kids, like, you have to say please and excuse me. Not necessarily because I think that, and I don't want them to think that this device here is human in any way, but I want to train them that when they interact with something that you can have a conversation with to a certain degree, and can be perceived, especially a young kid, as human, that they should know to say please and excuse me and thank you and things like that. So that it could be, I think there's room to say, without getting to the exact discussion of like, can you have, an AI that's in a body that's now part of a minion or not, or whatever, that just for our own betterment as human beings, we should treat it with a certain level of dignity and respect we would give to a human being, so that we don't become, start to look at other people like, actual people, like, oh, you're less than me or whatever. There are reasons to say not to as well, because maybe you don't want to uplift something that's clearly not human to a human state.
And thank you again,
Sure.
Rabbi Lightstone. Really appreciate it.
Thank you all very, very much.